Good afternoon and many greetings. My name is Sergio Tirado Herrero, and I am a research associate at the Center for Urban Resilience and Energy, CURE, at the University of Manchester. I thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you today, even if only in digital format. I am still recovering from a knee operation, and this has prevented me from coming to meet you in person at the 2014 Fuel Poverty Research Symposium in Belfast, which is a real pity, because the event looks like a really great opportunity to meet you all, research colleagues working in this emerging field of research known as energy or fuel poverty. Fortunately, the organizers of the event have been kind enough to allow me to make my presentation through this video that I hope will be representative of the kind of research that we are currently conducting in Manchester in the framework of the Energy Vulnerability and Urban Transitions in Europe project, also known as EVALUATE. The title of my presentation, co-authored with my Manchester colleagues Stefan Bouzarovski and Saska Petrova, is Energy Vulnerability in the EU, a multi-scalar assessment of domestic energy deprivation patterns. What I will show you here is a summary of some key results of the ongoing EVALUATE project, which aims to investigate the manner in which institutional structures, built tissues, and everyday practices shape energy vulnerability at a variety of geographical scales. The project interrogates these issues in the post-communist state of Eastern and Central Europe, an ideal space to study energy vulnerability due to its unique combination of cold climates, higher than average rates of inefficient housing, inadequately developed and decaying infrastructure, large income differentials, and economic and political restructuring issues. The starting point of this presentation is the notion of energy vulnerability, that has been defined as the propensity of a household to suffer from a lack of adequate energy services in the home. This novel concept aims to go beyond this rather rigid and static conceptualization of domestic energy affordability problems in terms of energy or fuel poverty. One first key difference between the energy poverty and energy vulnerability concepts is that energy vulnerability takes into consideration elements that are different from the three traditionally considered factors of energy poverty, that is, residential energy efficiency, energy prices, and household incomes. This way, aspects such as needs, practices, and recognition are taken into consideration for the analysis. Another important difference between concepts is that energy vulnerability puts a greater emphasis on the dynamic nature of domestic energy deprivation as a phenomenon. From this perspective, energy vulnerability can be seen as the changing set of circumstances that make a certain household fall into fuel or energy poverty when there is a change of the condition the household lives in. The EVALUATE project aims at providing an examination of energy vulnerability at the urban scale, for which 4 Eastern European cities have been selected: Gdańsk in Poland, Prague in the Czech Republic, Budapest in Hungary, and Skopje in Macedonia. However, before moving into the detail of the city scale, we have explored the spatial disparities in the incidence of domestic energy deprivation across EU member states. The correlation matrix presented on this slide summarizes the results of this analysis. It shows that higher energy poverty levels measured through well-known consensual indicators, such as the inability to keep the home adequately warm, are negatively correlated with GDP and actual individual consumption per capita, and positively correlated with monetary and material deprivation rates. Based on the results of the correlation analysis, a model of 3 EU regions is proposed. This is graphically represented on this slide by comparing the percentage of population unable to keep the home adequately warm with the percentage of population at risk of poverty and social exclusion for each member state. As we can see, Western member states report both lower incidence of poverty and thermal discomfort than southern and eastern member states. Substantial differences exist in the prices paid by domestic consumers of natural gas and electricity in the EU. Interestingly, energy prices do not seem to be an explanatory factor of the large spatial disparities found in energy poverty levels across EU member states. As seen in this figure, energy prices in Western member states are higher than in Eastern and Southern member states in spite of the lower rates of energy poverty found in the former. Domestic energy prices are nevertheless an important driver of energy vulnerability in the EU. This can be clearly seen in this figure that compares the EU average inflation rate or consumer price index, represented with the black line, with the rate of increase in domestic energy prices, represented with the red line. As we can see, domestic energy is an inflationary domestic energy expenditure item in most years between 1996 and 2012, with the exception of the periods 1996, 1998, 2002, and 2009-2010. We now look at one of the 4 Eastern European countries chosen as case studies by the Evaluate project, Hungary. A landlocked transition economy of Central Europe, Hungary largely depends on natural gas imported from the former Soviet Union for meeting its residential space heating demand. The energy performance of its residential stock, half of which is made up of large, inefficient single-family houses built before the 1990s, is another reason of concern. These 2 infrastructural legacies inherited from the socialist state are key to understand the growing vulnerability of Hungary's population to rapidly increasing natural gas prices. As a result of this combination of factors, energy vulnerability levels are increasing in Hungary in parallel to residential prices of natural gas and energy burdens, that is, the percentage of a household's income spent on domestic energy. As seen in the figure presented on this slide, by 2011, almost 80% of Hungarian households was spending on domestic energy more than 10% of their income. Perhaps more significant is that also in 2011, almost 10% of Hungarian households was spending more than 30% of their income on domestic energy. Hungarian households, especially those in the lower income strata, are reacting to rapidly growing natural gas prices and energy burdens by switching back to traditional fuels, mostly firewood. This phenomenon, which has been labeled as energy degradation, can be seen on this figure, which illustrates how the percentage of households relying on firewood as a source of domestic heat went up from 23 to 35% between 2006 and 2011. We offer some final remarks instead of a conclusion. The preliminary results of the ongoing Evaluate research evidence that substantial differences exist in the exposure to energy vulnerability in the EU. These spatial disparities are primarily explained by differences in welfare and poverty levels across member states, with inflationary energy prices being identified as a long-term driver of energy poverty for the whole EU. In the case of Eastern member states, the analysis evidences the importance of inherited infrastructural configurations such as the inefficiency of the housing stock and the import dependency from former Soviet Union suppliers, as seen in the case of Hungary. The interaction of a variety of driving factors makes energy vulnerability a multi-scalar and multi-sided phenomenon. This means that events occurring at very different places, scales, and times are having an impact on the everyday lives of today's households. 2 currently relevant policy-related driving factors are worth mentioning at this point: the impact of the global and euro area economic crisis on welfare levels across Europe, and the foreseeable impact of the transition to a low-carbon economy on vulnerable households via energy prices. And after these few concluding remarks, I thank you for your attention. Here are my email address and our Twitter feeds that you are very welcome to use for getting in touch with the Evaluate project team. So, this is all from my side. I really wish you a very successful symposium, and I really hope that next time we will be able to meet in person. Bye bye, and over to you, Belfast.